Presented by Exquisite Timepieces. More about them in the description down below and later in the video. The Hublot Big Bang Integral in gray ceramic is a watch that surprised me. I wasn't expecting to like it too much, and to be fair, there are some things that I don't love about it, but overall, I'm impressed with the watch, and I didn't see that coming. This watch comes in at a price of $23,100, and that's the first thing that I didn't love about it. But if I'm being honest, it probably has more to do with my wallet than what I think the watch is actually worth. Relative to other luxury watches, it's really not too crazy. I can't think of many watches that make great direct comparisons. It is, after all, a watch with a fully ceramic watch case and bracelet, an impressive in-house column wheel flyback chronograph movement, and an innovative and unique design. So yeah, what do you compare it to? That said, there are plenty of watches with some or all of those features that cost as much, if not more. So I don't hate the cost for any other reason than it's more than I typically spend on a watch in general. As for the specs, the dimensions on this one are kind of hard to measure. Hublot calls this a 42mm diameter watch, but depending on where I measure it from, it comes in at more like 44mm on my caliper. And regardless of what the measurement says, I will say that the presence is more like a 44mm to the eye and on the wrist, so there's that. The wingspan is another hard measurement to pull off, because where do you measure it from? It's got a nicely integrated watch case and bracelet, and you don't have well-defined lugs to start and stop on. So with that said, I'd say that it's probably around 49mm, give or take a hair. Thickness on this is around 12.5 to 14mm, which isn't bad at all for a chronograph, and it actually feels much thinner on the wrist, which is nice. Now, the lug width is kind of irrelevant because, again, the bracelet is integrated, but if I had to say, it's probably around a 20 to 21mm lug width. All that said, the bottom line is that this watch wears and presents a little bit larger on the wrist than I personally like, but it is lower profile than you might expect, and it is very lightweight thanks to that ceramic case and bracelet construction, both of which are really nice. The watch case and the bracelet are all in a mixed satin brushed and polished gray ceramic, and I really wound up liking the look and the feel of this material quite a lot. Now, of course, Hublot is known for its fusion of different materials, using things like ceramics, polymers, and rubber, and of course, steel. And there are probably very few brands that are as experimental when it comes to what they use to make a watch. Now, the crown and the chronograph pushers use a textured rubber covering, which gives it a superb grip and control over the surfaces that you interact with while setting the time and date and using the timing function. Now, it is easily one of the better experiences when it comes to screwing down the crown than any other watch that I've ever used, thanks to the addition of that rubber grip on the head of the crown. Of course, we have a sapphire crystal with anti-reflective coating and plenty of water resistance, 100 meters in this case. And the clasp on the watch is in a titanium deployant buckle style, which helps keep the weight down, but also keeps the durability high. The movement on this watch is the Hublot Unico 2, which is a flatter second-generation Unico movement measuring in at just 6 3/4mm thick. It is an automatic chronograph movement, and it has 72 hours of power reserve. It also has a view of the column wheel visible from the dial side of the movement, and the chronograph function is of a flyback type as well, which of course allows the user to restart the timing counter with one button push instead of 3. Now, one thing I noticed, and I was really impressed with, was just how soft of a touch it takes to start, stop, and reset the chronograph function. And compared to other chronographs that I've used, which includes the likes of the Speedmaster and, of course, the Daytona, this is the lightest clicking pusher that I've ever seen. Now, it's a little thing, but when it comes to operating the timing function, it does have the smoothest, nicest action that I've come across. And with the addition of those rubber caps on the pusher buttons, it really has a great grip and texture as well. Overall, it's a really nice movement, and I think it solves one of the historically biggest knocks against the Hublot brand. That being that they used to use ETA-based movements instead of in-house manufacture on all of their watches. They're starting to get into in-house now, and what they're doing is fantastic. On the wrist, this watch has pros and it has cons, which I've touched on already, but I think it bears repeating that, yes, it's larger than I was expecting based on the advertised 42mm size, and I don't prefer watches with this much wrist presence in general. But it is still quite comfortable, it's lightweight, and it's low profile, at least for a chronograph. With the integrated bracelet and the styling of the bezel, I will say that this gives you a bit of a royal oak vibe, which I don't think can be avoided. I mean, the royal oak kind of defines the style when it comes to integrated bracelets. But that's not to say that the aesthetic is a bad thing. I do quite like it a lot. Were the watch a bit smaller, I'd really be a huge fan. But as it sits, at least for me and my wrist, it's not something that I would consider buying. However, for the person that likes the size and the scale, I would highly recommend checking it out. There are a few other quick things that I want to point out before wrapping up this video, which include the dial, and it's obviously a dual register chronograph with a skeletonized watch face. And usually I don't care for skeletonized dials because it can make the watch hard to read, in my experience. But the handset, the dial markers, and the chapter ring are really very legible, and I don't have much of an issue with it here. The branding is also printed on the underside of the crystal as opposed to being more traditionally applied to the dial. And I can see why it's done that way here, but I don't love it. The branding does kind of get lost in the display with the open-faced dial behind it, and it just doesn't look the best to me, at least in my opinion. Finally, while I really do love the ceramic bezel, I will point out one thing, and that's the H-cut screws. They don't align in a unified way amongst all of the screws together. And I personally don't have a big deal with this, but for the person who might be a little bit obsessive over things like this, once you see it, you can't unsee it, and it might be something that bothers you. All that said, as previously mentioned, this is a watch that surprised me. I do like it quite a lot, and probably with a few tweaks and a bit of a smaller size, it is one that I would most happily add to my watch box, if the price wasn't a prohibitive factor. Still, this did introduce me to the Hublot brand with what you might say is a big bang. And yeah, the pun is intended, but what I will say is that I'm looking forward to seeing more from this brand in the future. I was really happy with this one. This video is presented in partnership with Exquisite Timepieces, located in Naples, Florida. Exquisite is an authorized dealer of dozens of watch brands, including Seiko and Grand Seiko, Omega, Oris, Blancpain, Breguet, and many more. Exquisite also has an amazing selection of pre-owned watches with new inventory coming in daily. So if you're looking for your next watch, check their website, exquisitetimepieces.com, or call their store at 239-227-2932, and let them know that you heard about them from Guy and the Just Blue Fish channel. I can't recommend them enough.